In. The dragon and phoenix wedding candles crackled, the wax tears winding down the golden dragon scale patterns like weeping blood. Inside the bridal chamber, the luxurious crimson 100 children and 1,000 grandchildren canopy was hung high by golden hooks. However, on this canopy bed where a single moment of the wedding night should be worth 1,000 pieces of gold, a preposterous scene was currently unfolding. Lu Xing, the cold-faced god of war who shook the 4 seas and held heavy military power in the Great Zhou dynasty, was currently spread-eagled, tied securely to the 4 carved red sandalwood posts of the bed with red silk as thick as 4 fingers. The finely crafted crimson wedding robes on his body were already in disarray, revealing his firm chest beneath. His originally cold and deep eyes were now filled with bloodshot veins, like a trapped lion in a pit, ready to devour anyone at any moment. Su Yin, how dare you drug me? Lu Xing roared through gritted teeth, the veins on his temples bulging from extreme rage and struggle. He attempted to channel his internal energy to snap the red silks binding his wrists, but his dantian was completely empty. Not only was he unable to muster a shred of strength, but a searing, wicked fire was rising from his lower abdomen, burning his sanity to the brink of collapse. I sat by the edge of the bed, quietly watching his display of impotent fury, my expression devoid of any ripple of emotion. I raised my slender fingers and removed the phoenix crown that had been making my neck ache from its weight, tossing it carelessly onto the nearby rosewood side table. The dull thud it made sounded jarringly abrupt within the tension-filled wedding chamber. General, save your strength. I slowly massaged my aching neck, my tone as calm as if I were discussing the moonlight tonight. The nuptial wine was laced with a secret medicine from the western regions called limp tendon powder, mixed with a touch of top-grade aphrodisiac incense. This drug is colorless and tasteless, dissolving instantly in liquid. Even someone with internal power as profound as yours, General, won't be able to move an inch for the next 12 double hours. You poisonous woman, do you think that by using such lowly tactics, this general will touch you? Lu Xing stared at me intently, the loathing in his eyes so intense it nearly overflowed. His voice had grown hoarse as the drug began to take effect. Relying on the remaining influence of the Su family, you begged the emperor for this marriage decree, forcibly snatching Wanner's position as the primary wife. I am telling you, even if you have obtained the title of general's wife, I will never lay a finger on you. For the rest of your life, you shall remain a widow in all but name. Hearing the name Wanner, I didn't flare up with jealousy as he had expected. Instead, I couldn't help but curl my lips into an extremely mocking sneer. Li Wan, his cherished white moonlight, an orphaned girl of humble birth but formidable schemes. Lu Xing thought I was madly in love with him. He thought I had resorted to any means necessary just to tear them apart. But how could he have known? If it weren't to save my life, I, Su Yin, would have sooner shorn my hair and become a nun in a convent than set foot inside his Lu manor. 3 months ago, my father, the Grand Chancellor Su He, was framed by political rivals for treason and collaborating with the enemy. The entire Su clan was sentenced to execution, with only the female members spared for exile to Lingnan. That is a barren wasteland plagued by miasma. If my mother and sister were sent there, they would have no chance of survival. Just as I was falling into despair, a secret decree brought me clandestinely into the imperial study. The emperor sat high upon his dragon throne, his gaze deep and inscrutable as he looked at me. Su Yin, Lu Xing holds command over a massive army, yet he refuses to marry or father an heir, all for the sake of some orphan girl of unknown origin. I cannot tolerate the bloodline of the Lu family army falling into the hands of an outsider. If you can marry him and conceive his legitimate son within a year to serve as the imperial family's leverage over him, I will pardon the women of the Su family and reopen your father's case. Within 1 year, you must be pregnant. Otherwise, the entire Su clan shall be executed to the 9th generation. The emperor's icy voice still echoes in my ears to this day. So, as I look at Lu Xing, who is glaring at me from the bed, I see him as a life-saving driftwood, or rather, a prime piece of breeding soil. The general misunderstands. I stood up and walked slowly to the bedside, looking down at him from above. I don't crave your love, nor do I care about your Wanner. I tied you here tonight simply to borrow something from you. What? What are you trying to do? Lu Xing watched me approach step by step, a flicker of astonishment and defensiveness finally crossing his eyes. I didn't answer. Instead, I drew a sharp dagger from my sleeve. The blade flashed with a cold glint under the candlelight. Lu Xing's pupils constricted violently, thinking I intended to kill him. However, in the next second, with a sharp rip of tearing silk, the dagger in my hand mercilessly slashed through the remaining inner garment he was wearing. Firm, full pectoral muscles, well-defined abdominals, and several old scars symbolizing his illustrious military achievements were instantly exposed to the air without reservation. Su Yin! How dare you! Lu Zhang's entire body jolted. His eyes were bloodshot, brimming with humiliation and rage. He was the great Zhou's god of war, an iron-blooded man who could take an enemy general's head amidst 10,000 soldiers as easily as reaching into a bag, yet at this moment, he was stripped bare and bound to a bed by a woman like some common prostitute. The daring part is yet to come. I gave a cold laugh, tossed the dagger aside, and leaned down to press against him. As my cool fingertips brushed against his burning skin, Lu Xing trembled uncontrollably. The aphrodisiac incense had taken full effect, even as his mind screamed in frantic resistance. His young, vigorous, and hot-blooded body reacted honestly to my touch. Get off. Don't touch me. You disgust me. He bit the tip of his tongue, trying to use the sharp pain to maintain clarity. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, adding a touch of tragic desolation to his appearance. Just then, a sudden flurry of urgent knocking erupted from outside the wedding chamber. General! General! Are you in there? Outside the door, Li Wan's personal maid, Chuier, cried out as she pounded on the wood. Miss Wan has been struck by a sudden, sharp pain in her chest and has fainted. Please, General, go and see her at once. Hearing this, Lu Xing struggled violently on the bed, the red silk around his wrists instantly cutting deep, bloody welts into his skin. Su Yin, let me go this instant. If anything happens to Wanner, I will never forgive you. I stopped what I was doing and looked down coldly at him. Seeing him so frantic and grief-stricken for another woman, I felt not a shred of bitterness, only a profound sense of mockery. Li Wan's heart palpitations certainly have a knack for timing. They didn't flare up early or late, but chose to strike precisely on our wedding night, during the candlelit hours of the bridal chamber. This was a blatant attempt to lure Lu Xing away from the wedding suite, leaving me, the newly wedded primary wife, to spend my wedding night alone, making me the laughingstock of the entire capital. The love-struck fools of my past life might have been heartbroken by this, but I will not be. I straightened my slightly disheveled crimson wedding robes and turned toward the door. What do you think you're doing? Lu Xing roared from behind me. I threw the door open with a violent jerk. Outside the door, Chuier was weeping piteously, her face like a pear blossom bathed in rain. Seeing the door open, she was about to rush inside, only to collide head-on with my frost-cold expression. Madam, Chuier stammered, startled by the murderous intent in my eyes. However, emboldened by Lu Zhang's backing, she steeled herself and cried out, "This servant must see the general. Miss Wan is dying." Slap! I raised my hand and, without a moment's hesitation, delivered a vicious slap to Chuier's face. I put all my strength into it. With a shrill scream, she was sent flying, landing heavily on the snow-covered ground of the courtyard, blood instantly seeping from the corner of her mouth. What insolence to be shouting like this! Standing on the steps, my gaze swept over the peeping servants in the courtyard like a blade, my voice cold and authoritative. Tonight is the joyous wedding night of the general and his madam. A mere concubine who has yet to even enter this household dares to feign illness to vie for favor on the legal wife's wedding night? If she truly has chest pains and is dying, then go fetch a doctor or the proprietor of a coffin shop. The general is no physician. Can his presence bring her back from the dead? You! How could you be so vicious? Madam! Chuier clutched her face, staring at me in disbelief. Vicious? I'll show you what true viciousness looks like. I let out a cold sneer and barked at the guards in the courtyard. Men! This lowly servant has intruded upon the bridal chamber with the intent to sabotage the general's wedding. Drag her away and give her 30 strokes of the heavy board. As for that lady Wan with the heart pains, send 2 old matrons to watch over her. If she dies tonight, drag her out and bury her tomorrow morning. If she lives, she is to come to the main courtyard at the appointed time to serve me tea. Anyone else who dares disturb the general shall be punished alongside this wench. Yes, madam. The guards were intimidated by the fierce aura radiating from me and dared not disobey. They immediately pounced like wolves and tigers, dragging Chuer away. Her shrill screams echoed through the night sky, instantly reducing the entire general's estate to a deathly silence. Having dealt with the noise outside, I turned around, closed the door, and locked it once more. Returning to the bedside, Lu Jing was already trembling with rage, staring at me fixedly. Su Yin, how dare you? Wanner is frail. For you to humiliate her like this. Shoo, I extended a slender finger, pressing it gently against his warm lips to interrupt his cursing. General, the lovely night is short. Do not let irrelevant people spoil our mood. I straddled him, meeting his murderous gaze without the slightest hint of avoidance. I knew that at this moment, he wanted nothing more than to hack me into 1,000 pieces. The more he hated me, the more exhilarated I felt, because it meant that I would personally drag this high and mighty deity down into the mire. General, close your eyes. If you truly find my face so loathsome, you can simply pretend I am your Wanner. I leaned down, my breath sweet against his ear. Yet my voice was as cold as frost. After all, you can do nothing now but cooperate with me obediently. In your dreams, I would rather die than, before he could finish his sentence. I had already shed the last of my coverings. There was no foreplay, no tenderness. I clenched my teeth, enduring the searing, tearing pain as I forced my body down. Ugh, Lu Jing let out a muffled groan, his eyes snapping wide, his pupils filled with shock and humiliation. The sensory stimulation from the drug, intertwined with extreme fury, caused his body to tense like a fully drawn bow. He wanted to throw me off, wanted to snap my neck, but the red silks binding his limbs held him in a death grip. It hurt. A piercing pain caused fine beads of cold sweat to break out on my forehead. Yet I did not so much as knit my brows. I gripped his firm shoulders tightly, my fingernails sinking deep into his flesh to alleviate the agonizing pain below. There were no sweet words, only heavy breathing and suppressed groans echoing within the red bed curtains. This was no wedding night. It was a life and death battle, a cold transaction solely for the sake of procreation. Lu Jing closed his eyes, no longer looking at me, but his clenched jaw and the taut muscles in his cheeks spoke of the profound humiliation he was enduring at this moment. A dignified god of war, forced to be plucked and supplemented by a woman on his wedding night. I know not how much time passed before the red candles burned out. With one final, low growl, Lu Jing's spine snapped straight before he collapsed limply onto the bed. As the effects of the drug receded significantly, he gasped violently for air, his entire body drenched in sweat as if he had just been hauled out of a river. Exhausted, I rolled off him, my legs trembling uncontrollably, but I did not pause for a moment. I grabbed a cloak to wrap around myself and walked to the table, pouring a cup of pre-prepared lukewarm tea and draining it in one gulp. It was a top-grade fertility decoction. After finishing the medicine, I turned around and met the eyes on the couch, eyes that were fixed on me with a murderous glare. Lu Jing's fingers were already able to curl slightly. With a hoarse voice, he squeezed out a few words through gritted teeth. One by one, Su Yin, this general, will surely tear your body into 10,000 pieces. I walked to the bedside and used a dagger to slice through the red silk bound around his wrists. That will have to wait until after I give birth to your eldest son. I looked at the shocking welts on his wrists, my lips curling into a satisfied, cold sneer, like a ruthless patron who had finished his business and left nothing behind. The general performed well last night. Tonight, we shall continue. The morning sunlight of the hour of Chin pierced through the carved window lattices, spilling onto the golden brick floor of the general mansion's main hall. I sat upright in the red sandalwood armchair, slowly and methodically arranging the floating leaves in my teacup with an ivory pick. My mistress's daily attire, a robe of vibrant red silk tapestry interwoven with gold thread, accentuated my commanding presence to the fullest. At my collar, the few ambiguous red marks I inadvertently revealed were the spoils of war from last night's absurd battle. Last night, as soon as the effects of the drug wore off, Lu Jing stumbled out the door as if fleeing a plague. I was not angered. I allowed my dowry maid, Chun Tao, to wash and dress me, and then I took my seat in the main hall, waiting for the show to begin. According to the rules, the servants and concubines of the household must come to kowtow and offer tea. However, the sun was already high in the sky, yet Li Wan, the white moonlight famous throughout the capital whom Lu Jing kept in the manor, was nowhere to be seen. Dozens of female stewards stood below the dais, all looking submissive with lowered brows. But in reality, they were all stealing glances at me from the corners of their eyes, waiting to see the new mistress become a laughingstock. "Madam," Chun Tao whispered, her voice laced with indignation, "that Miss Li is far too arrogant. She is clearly trying to assert her dominance over you on purpose." I blew gently on the tea foam and gave a light chuckle. "What is the rush? Look, she has arrived." No sooner had the words left my lips than the jingling of jade pendants reached my ears. A frail-looking woman appeared, supported by two maidservants, stepping over the threshold with the delicate grace of a willow swaying in the breeze. The newcomer was none other than Li Wan. However, as I looked at her attire today, my gaze instantly turned cold. On the day following the grand wedding, she had actually dressed in a moon-white skirt so plain it was almost deathly pale. Her hair was held by nothing but a simple silver hairpin, and her face, devoid of any makeup, was marked by 2 streaks of tears and swollen eyes. To an outsider, it would have seemed as though the general's estate had hosted a funeral last night rather than a wedding. "Honor offers her respects to the madam." Li Wan walked to the center of the hall but did not kneel. She merely gave a slight, weak curtsy. Her voice was so frail it sounded as if it might scatter in the wind. "Last night, Honor suffered from chest pains and struggled all through the night, which is why I am late. I trust that Madam is magnanimous and surely would not hold a grudge against a sick woman like me." Every sentence she spoke was a display of weakness, yet every word was a calculated blow to the heart. She not only pointed out her actions in ruining my wedding night but also used the phrase magnanimous to trap me on a pedestal. If I were to punish her, I would be labeled as harsh and jealous. The older servant women below the dais exchanged several knowing glances. As if watching a play, I slammed the teacup onto the table with a heavy thud. The entire main hall fell silent in an instant. Presumptuous. I didn't even lift my eyelids. My voice wasn't loud, yet it carried a bone-chilling coldness. Is this how the general's manor teaches rules? A commoner orphan with neither name nor status dares to remain standing before the mistress of the house? Chun Tao, teach her how to salute. Yes. Without a word, Chun Tao stepped forward and delivered a harsh kick to the back of Li Wan's knees. "Ah!" Li Wan let out a shrill cry as her knees slammed heavily onto the hard floor, her features contorting in agony. You dare hit me?" Li Wan lifted her head in disbelief, the venom in her eyes nearly impossible to conceal. "Brother Zheng said that in this manner, no one would dare lay a finger on me." "Brother Zheng?" I looked down at her from my vantage point, a cold sneer playing on my lips. "This is the main hall of the general's manor, not one of those brothels or pleasure houses you frequent. Li Wan, just what do you think you are? In terms of birth, you are a refugee who cannot even produce proper identification. In terms of status, the general has yet to submit the official documents to the government to take you as a concubine. You are nothing more than a lowly guest living under someone else's roof. Yet you dare to act like the mistress of the house? Someone, bring the tea," I commanded sternly. The maid brought forward a bowl of scalding tea and presented it to Li Wan. Li Wan gritted her teeth, her hands trembling as she picked up the teacup. A flash of ruthlessness flickered in her downcast eyes. The moment she raised the cup before me, her fingers suddenly loosened, and the entire bowl of boiling tea splashed straight toward the back of my hand. Had I failed to dodge in time, the skin on this hand would surely have been scalded off. Unfortunately for her, I had already witnessed such petty tricks countless times within the inner courtyards of the Su family. I did not dodge. Instead, I swept my sleeve out with a sudden, forceful motion. Asterisk clang. Asterisk the teacup was struck by my wide sleeve and sent flying back. hitting Li Wan squarely in the chest. The scalding tea instantly soaked through her thin white garment, causing her to let out a shrill, gut-wrenching scream like a slaughtered pig. Before she could react, I stood up abruptly and delivered a resounding slap with the back of my hand. Slap! The crisp sound of the slap echoed through the empty main hall. Li Wan was knocked straight to the ground by the blow. Half of her face immediately swelled with a 5-fingered imprint, and a trickle of blood seeped from the corner of her mouth. You lowly wench! Do you truly think I am a pushover? I stepped toward her, my voice sharp with fury. To wear such unlucky mourning clothes on the day after my wedding just to spite me, and then to deliberately scald your mistress while serving tea. Do you honestly believe that with the general protecting you, you can rule this household as you please? Wanner! Just then, a thunderous roar erupted from outside the door. Lu Jing strode into the main hall, his face ashen and his eyes still bloodshot from the previous night. When he saw Li Wan collapsed on the floor, half her face swollen and her chest scalded a raw red, his eyes nearly split with rage. Brother Jing. As soon as Li Wan saw Lu Jing, she immediately clung to him like a drowning person grasping at a straw. She scrambled into his arms, sobbing so hard she could barely catch her breath. The madam. She cannot tolerate Wanner. It would be better if Wanner just died. Su Yin, you are seeking death. Lu Jing shielded Li Wan behind him. Like a maddened beast, he unsheathed the sword at his waist and pointed it directly at my throat. Last night you used such foul means to humiliate me, and today you brutally beat Wanner. Do you truly think that because you hold the Emperor's secret decree, this general would not dare to kill you? The icy blade pressed against my skin, sending a shiver through me, but I did not retreat even half a step. Instead, I took a step forward, meeting the edge of the sword. Fine. Do it. I looked directly into his bloodshot eyes, my lips curling into a mocking sneer. If I die, by tomorrow the entire capital will know that the grand great general protector of the realm, for the sake of a woman, favored a concubine to the point of destroying his wife and defied an imperial decree. When that time comes and the emperor's thunderous wrath descends, guess whether that delicate Wanner in your arms will be hacked into 1,000 pieces or executed by 1,000 cuts. Lu Zhang's hand holding the sword trembled violently. No matter how arrogant he was, he knew deep down that imperial power was absolute. The emperor was already searching for any pretext to move against him. If I truly died here today, not only would the Lu army be implicated, but Li Wan would undoubtedly face certain death. Watching the struggle and suppressed indignation in his eyes, I reached out and pinched the blade of his sword with 2 fingers, pushing it away with an expression of disgust. General, the rules are as vast as the heavens. I turned around, my commanding gaze sweeping over all the trembling servants in the hall. She showed disrespect to the mistress of the house. It is only right and natural that I punish her. If the general truly feels such heartache, he is more than welcome to seek grace before His Majesty to elevate her to the status of an equal wife. But as long as that imperial decree remains unissued, in this manner, she is nothing more than a lowly concubine who must kowtow and serve me tea. From this day forward, I, Su Yin, have the final say in the inner chambers of this general's manor. If anyone dares to treat the rules as wind passing through their ears again. I looked coldly at Lu Jing and Li Wan, dropping each word like a heavy gavel. Last night's 30 strokes of the board will be their fate. Lu Zhang's chest heaved violently with rage, yet he gritted his teeth, unable to utter a single word in rebuttal. With a face turned livid, he scooped up the still sobbing Li Wan and, like a defeated rooster, flicked his sleeves and retreated in disgrace. Watching their fleeing figures, I slowly sat back down in the grand armchair, picked up a freshly served cup of hot tea, and took a gentle sip. Following the tea ceremony turmoil, Lu Jing did not set foot in the main courtyard for half a month. He moved into the military camp on the outskirts of the capital. On the rare occasions he returned to the manor, he went straight to Li Wan's Qingying pavilion, refusing to spare me even a single glance. Rumors spread throughout the entire household that although the new madam was overbearing, she did not have the general's favor and would be divorced sooner or later. Lu Jing thought he could use this cold shoulder to force me into a retreat. He believed that as long as he didn't touch me, I wouldn't be able to fulfill the emperor's secret decree, and would ultimately face execution along with the rest of the Su family. Unfortunately, he underestimated me. The fact that he didn't return to our room only made it easier for me to clean up this foul and chaotic inner household. I ordered Chen Tao to lead men to seal off the accounting room immediately. Although Li Wan had no official status, she had been managing the household affairs for the past 2 years as if she were the mistress. Her distant cousin, Manager Qian, actually had the audacity to pull rank when he saw me auditing the accounts, refusing to hand over the keys to the storehouse. "Madam, only Miss Wan is permitted to view these ledgers. The general has instructed that the manor's financial disbursements." Crash! I smashed the teacup at his feet, cutting him off coldly. "Someone, seize this insolent servant and give him 40 strokes of the board. Raid the Qian household and immediately seize all ledgers for an audit." Under these thunderous measures, Steward Qian was beaten until his flesh was torn and his skin gaped. Wailing for his parents, he finally surrendered the keys. This investigation truly yielded a massive surprise for me. Li Wan came from a humble background. To maintain appearances among the noble circles of the capital, she purchased top-grade birds' nests and commissioned custom-made Suzhou embroidery gowns, leaving the manor's public accounts long since depleted. More fatally, she had the audacity to secretly embezzle 30,000 taels of silver from the treasury, funds Lu Xing had set aside to be sent next month as pensions for the families of soldiers fallen at the border. That was blood money, earned with the very lives of the soldiers of the Lu family army. Clutching this ironclad evidence, I calculated the dates. My period had just ended, marking the peak fertile window the physician had mentioned. Everything was ready. All that was missing was the stud himself, Lu Xing. At nightfall, I sent someone to the Qingyin pavilion with a message. "Tell the general that if he does not come to the main courtyard before midnight tonight, I will personally deliver Steward Qian and this account book to the capital prefect's office first thing tomorrow morning." In less than the time it takes for half a stick of incense to burn, a loud bang echoed as the door to the main courtyard was kicked open. Lu Xing strode in, cloaked in a freezing chill and suppressed fury. He slammed the door shut behind him with a heavy thud, his eyes fixed on me like venom-dipped blades. "Su Yin, what exactly are you trying to do?" Warner merely made a few minor oversights while managing the household. "How dare you use that to threaten this general?" Dressed in a thin, crimson nightgown, I leaned languidly against the side of the canopy bed and carelessly tossed the ledger onto the table. "A few minor oversights?" I sneered. "Is the general so blinded by love for his concubine that he's lost his sight? 30,000 taels of military pension funds. According to the laws of the Great Zhou, embezzling military pay is a capital offense. Tell me, if this ledger were to land on the emperor's desk, do you think your precious Warner would be beheaded? Or sent to the government brothels?" Lu Zhang's face turned deathly pale in an instant, the knuckles of his clenched fists cracking audibly. He was no fool. He naturally understood the stakes involved. The emperor was already searching for any pretext to move against him, and Li Wan's actions were undoubtedly handing the emperor the very blade he needed. "Those 30,000 taels. I will find a way to make up the deficit." Lu Xing gritted his teeth, sounding like a cornered beast driven to its limit. "With what? Your meager salary? Or by selling off your family heirlooms?" I stood up and walked slowly toward him, tilting my head back to look him in the eye. "Though the Su family has fallen on hard times, my dowry happens to contain exactly 30,000 taels in ready banknotes." Lu Xing looked at me warily, his eyes brimming with humiliation. "What do you want in exchange?" "It's quite simple." I reached out, my fingertips lightly flicking open the leather belt at his waist. "As long as the general stays in the main courtyard. Not just tonight, but for the next half-month, whenever I send for you, you must obediently sleep in this canopy bed. Until I am with child. In your dreams." Lu Xing violently slapped my hand away, laughing out of sheer rage. "Su Yin, you shameless, poisonous woman. I would rather borrow the money than suffer such humiliation from you. The general is more than welcome to try borrowing it." I stepped back nonchalantly, my voice cold to the bone. "However, the officers from the capital prefecture will arrive first thing tomorrow morning. I fear your speed in borrowing money won't match the speed at which Li Wan is sent to prison. When that happens, the scandal of the God of War's confidant being a thief who embezzled military funds will surely rock the capital." Lu Xing stared at me intently, his chest heaving violently. The hatred in his eyes looked as if it could swallow me alive. Yet his reason kept him pinned firmly to the spot. For Li Wan's sake, and for the sake of the Lu army's honor, he had no other choice. After a long silence, he closed his eyes and squeezed a few words through his gritted teeth. Su Yin, you truly are a lunatic. Thank you for the compliment, General. I smiled faintly and turned toward the canopy bed. Undress. Don't waste time. The sooner we finish, the sooner you can go back to accompany your precious Wanner. Lu Jing froze in place like a puppet that had lost its soul. A moment later, his hands trembling, he shed his garments piece by piece. Carrying a body full of humiliation and submission, he walked toward that canopy bed that had once caused him such agonizing pain. This time, there was no aphrodisiac incense, no muscle-weakening powder. He was as sober as could be. He hovered over me stiffly, his movements crude and rigid, as if he were executing a loathsome military order just to get it over with as quickly as possible. I was jolted by his impact until it hurt, my brow furrowing deeply. How could a union filled with such resistance and perfunctoriness ever conceive a strong heir? I reached up to hook my arms around his sweat-drenched neck, pressing my red lips close to his ear as I whispered a provocation. If this is all the general is capable of, how are you any different from a dying eunuch? If you can't manage, I'll light another burner of aphrodisiac and tie you up again. This sentence precisely trampled on Lu Zhang's bottom line as a man. You're asking for death. Lu Zhang's eyes suddenly turned scarlet, the humiliation in his gaze completely transforming into a beast-like fury. He pinned my hands behind my head with one hand and bit down hard on my lips. The taste of blood instantly spread through both our mouths. There was no tenderness, only a frantic conquest. It was as if he were venting the pent-up frustration and anger of the past few days, wanting to tear me to pieces right there on the bed. And this is exactly what I want. Intense pain and pleasure intertwined. I gritted my teeth, catering to his tempestuous demands as my nails left bloody streaks across his back. I wanted him to pour all his strength into my body. I wanted the seed of hatred to take root and sprout within my womb. The night was still long, and in this gamble known as borrowing a seed, I was destined to be the final victor. 2 consecutive months of nightly favors were less an affair of passion and more a life-and-death struggle between two beasts upon the canopy bed. Every time, Lu Jing came with a heart full of humiliation and violence, attempting to humiliate me to death upon the mattress. Meanwhile, I gritted my teeth and swallowed all the pain and disgrace along with my own blood, all for that single thread of survival. Heaven does not betray those who persevere. On this early autumn morning, as I caught the scent of the fish congee Chun Tao brought in, a sudden wave of nausea surged up my throat. I shoved the porcelain bowl aside and leaned over the spittoon, retching, while my heart hammered uncontrollably against my ribs. Half an hour later, Physician Zhao, my mother's former confidant who now lived under an assumed name running a clinic in the capital, was quietly ushered into the main courtyard through the back door by Chun Tao. Congratulations, madam, Physician Zhao said after checking my pulse through a silk veil. A glimmer of emotional tears flickered in his clouded eyes as he lowered his voice. The pulse is as smooth as rolling pearls. You are nearly 2 months pregnant. Although the fetus is somewhat unstable due to the mother's deficiency in qi and blood, it can certainly be preserved with proper care and nourishment. I instinctively stroked my flat abdomen and let out a long, heavy sigh of relief. This is not just a piece of flesh. This is the life-saving talisman for every woman in the Su family, and the sole bargaining chip to clear my father's name. Chun Tao, reward Imperial Physician Zhao handsomely. I suppressed the wild joy in my heart, my gaze instantly turning cold and sharp. Furthermore, ensure that the news of my pregnancy is accidentally overheard by that coarse servant woman who empties the slops for Qingyin Pavilion. Chun Tao understood immediately, a sharp glint flashing in her eyes. I understand. I will see to it at once. The bait has been cast. Now it is only a matter of time before that vicious fish takes the hook. Sure enough, Li Wan did not keep me waiting for long. She knew all too well that her humble origins meant she relied entirely on Lu Zhang's favor to survive. Once I gave birth to the General Mansion's eldest legitimate son, my status would be secured by the child. She would never have a chance to rise for the rest of her life. and her very foothold in this household would be completely stripped away by me. 3 days later, Lu Xing returned to the mansion for military affairs and, as usual, went to the study first. Soon after, Li Wan arrived at my main courtyard, swaying gracefully and carrying an exquisite red sandalwood food box. Madam, Li Wan had put on a gentle and lovely facade, as if the resentment from being slapped by me in the main hall and being forced to hand over the household management rights had completely vanished. The autumn dew is heavy and cold. Warner has specially prepared top-grade blood bird's nest to apologize to Madam. Whatever the fault, it is all Warner's doing. I only hope that after drinking this bowl of bird's nest, Madam can find it in her heart to allow Warner to stay in the mansion to serve the general. As she spoke, she opened the food box. The crystal-clear blood bird's nest emitted an enticing aroma from within the white jade bowl. I sat upright on the Luohan bed, coldly watching her masterful performance. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of a familiar black hem striding through the courtyard gate. Lu Xing had arrived. Li Wan's timing was impeccable. She wanted Lu Xing to see her in this pitiful, subservient state, all to highlight my arrogance. You brewed this yourself? I curled my lips, looking at her with a half-smile. Yes. Warner stood by the stove and simmered it for 3 whole hours. Li Wan lowered her eyes, concealing the malice hidden within them. Very well. I suddenly stood up, walked toward her step by step, and abruptly picked up that bowl of scalding bird's nest soup. A flash of triumphant ecstasy flickered in Li Wan's eyes. She expected me to either drink it or splash it all over her as I had done last time, thereby confirming my reputation for malice in front of Lu Xing. Suddenly, I gripped her chin with a deathly force, forcing her mouth open, and ruthlessly poured that bowl of blood bird's nest down her throat. MMPH, cough, cough, cough. Since you brewed this tonic with your own hands, then I shall bestow it upon you. My eyes were like knives and my movements were savage. Ignoring her struggles, I forced more than half the bowl of blood bird's nest down her throat. Su Yin, have you lost your mind? Lu Xing, who had just stepped into the courtyard, witnessed the scene. His eyes nearly split with rage as he rushed forward, shoved me aside, and pulled the violently coughing Li Wan, whose face was covered in soup, into his protective embrace. What kind of madness is this now? Warner kindly brought you supplements, and yet you humiliate her like this. Brother Zhang, save me, my stomach. Li Wan suddenly let out a shrill, agonizing scream. She clutched her lower abdomen tightly as large beads of cold sweat instantly broke out on her forehead. She curled up in Lu Xing's arms in excruciating pain, her fingernails even leaving bloody streaks as she clawed at the floor tiles. Lu Xing panicked, holding Li Wan as he roared. A doctor! Someone get a doctor! Quickly! There's no need to call for one. The doctor has been waiting for a long time. I clapped my hands with cold indifference. Old imperial physician Zhao stepped out of the inner chamber, while Chun Tao shoved a kitchen maid, who had been bound hand and foot, into the center of the courtyard. If the general does not believe me, you are more than welcome to have the physician examine the dregs remaining at the bottom of this bowl. I looked down coldly at the shocked Lu Xing. This bowl of blood bird's nest was laced with a heavy dose of safflower, musk, and bone crusher, an extremely potent abortifacient from the western regions. With this dosage, let alone a pregnant woman, even a healthy woman who isn't pregnant would suffer instant, agonizing abdominal cramps and lose any possibility of ever conceiving again for the rest of her life. Lu Zhang's entire body jolted as he looked down in disbelief at Li Wan, who was rolling in pain in his arms. The kitchen maid on the ground had long since lost her nerve, kowtowing frantically. General, have mercy. It was Miss One who gave me a 50-tael banknote and told me to put this packet of powder into the madam's bird's nest. I was blinded by greed for a moment. I begged the general for mercy. The evidence was as solid as a mountain. Li Wan was drenched in a cold sweat from the pain, yet she still clung desperately to Lu Zhang's lapels, pleading, "No, it's not true. She framed me. I didn't." But the debris scattered across the floor and the maid's confession were like a resounding slap across Lu Zhang's face. He looked at the woman in his arms, the white moonlight he had desperately protected and believed to be pure and flawless, and for the first time, shock, estrangement, and an irrepressible sense of disgust surfaced in his eyes. Why? Lu Zhang's hands were trembling. Do you have any idea what you've done? Of course she knew. I stepped forward, looking down at the pair of star-crossed lovers, and mercilessly dropped the final bombshell. The one she wanted to kill was the child in my womb. Lu Zhang, I am pregnant. Lu Zhang snapped his head up, staring fixedly at my abdomen. His mind buzzed as if something had completely exploded within him. Do you really think I plotted so carefully to marry you? Even going as far as using drugs to force the consummation, just for the empty title of general's wife? I crouched down, looking directly into Lu Zhang's pupils, which were dilated from extreme shock. In a voice only the three of us could hear, I spoke one word at a time. This child is the subject of a secret imperial decree. The emperor ordered me to give birth to the eldest legitimate son of the Lu army within a year to serve as a hostage. Otherwise, my entire Su family will be executed, and you, Lu Zhang, for wielding your military power with arrogance and defying imperial orders, you would face the same death penalty for your entire clan. Lu Zhang's face instantly drained of all color, turning as pale as paper. He finally understood. What he had mistaken for mere inter-court jealousy was actually a life and death trap set by the supreme imperial power. If Li Wan had truly caused my miscarriage with poison today, the blade of execution for defying imperial decrees and plotting rebellion would have fallen upon the necks of Lu Zhang and the entire Lu army tomorrow. That fool Li Wan, for the sake of her own selfish desires, had nearly sent the entire Lu family and 100,000 soldiers to the guillotine. No, it's impossible. Brother Zhang, she's lying. Li Wan was still making a final, desperate struggle, but Lu Zhang was no longer looking at her. As if struck by an electric shock, he abruptly released his hold on Li Wan, letting her collapse onto the cold floor tiles like a discarded rag. Lu Zhang slowly stood up, his gaze toward me filled with fear, defeat, and a profound sense of despair. In the face of imperial power, the military authority he took pride in and the self-righteous love he believed in were all utterly fragile. Someone, come. Lu Zhang closed his eyes, his voice so hoarse he sounded as if he had aged 10 years. The Li woman is malicious and has conspired to harm the mistress of the house. From this day forward, break her legs and throw her into the backyard woodshed. Without my command, no one is permitted to visit her. Brother Zhang, you can't do this to me. Li Wan screamed in despair, attempting to cling to Lu Zhang's legs, only to be brutally dragged away by the estate guards. Piercing shrieks, accompanied by the dull thud of breaking bones, tore through the air above the general's manor. I watched the long trail of blood Li Wan dragged across the floor in silence, my heart devoid of any ripple of emotion. From the moment she harbored murderous intent toward the unborn child in my womb, she was already a dead woman. In this Shira field of power, whoever dares to block my path to saving the Su family, I will send them to hell. The first snow of midwinter fell in flurries, blanketing the upturned eaves of the general's manor. Today's main hall was even more bustling than on the day of the grand wedding, yet it was cold enough to make one's blood run chill. Lord Gu of the Court of Judicial Review and the chief eunuch of the Imperial Seal, Eunuch Li, sat in the seats of honor. Lu Zhang stood below them, his face haggard, his eyes filled with shock and suspicion. And Li Wan, who had her legs broken that day and had been lingering on the brink of death in the woodshed for 2 months, was now being dragged into the hall like a pile of rotting mud by 2 coarse servant women and tossed onto the cold gold leaf bricks. Her hair was grizzled and she looked like a withered ghost. There was not a single trace left of her former delicate beauty. Su Yin, you have gone to such great lengths today, even summoning people from the Court of Judicial Review and the Inner Court. What exactly are you trying to do? Lu Zhang stared at me intently, his voice incredibly hoarse. Over the past 2 months, knowing that the imperial power hung like a blade over his neck, he had been walking on thin ice every day, and his entire being was exhausted from the torment. Wrapped in a thick foxfur cloak, I sat upright in the grand armchair. With one hand protecting my slightly protruding lower abdomen, I slammed a heavy red sandalwood box down at Lu Zhang's feet with a loud thud. What am I doing? Naturally, I am settling a grand account of family and state for the general. I looked down at him coldly. Open it and see. Lu Zhang's hand trembled as he slowly crouched down and pried open the wooden box. Inside was a thick stack of secret letters and a bronze-black token engraved with a wolf head totem. The moment he saw the token clearly, Liu Zhang's pupils suddenly constricted, and the blood in his body seemed to freeze in an instant. As a general who had fought against the Beatty for years, it was impossible for him not to recognize it. This was a high-level command token of the Beatty Imperial Intelligence Network. Where was this found? Liu Xing grabbed the letters in disbelief, scanning them rapidly as his hands shook like fallen leaves in the wind. It was dug up from beneath the floor tiles of your precious Wanner's Qingyin pavilion. I stood up, my voice like cracking ice, resonant and forceful. General Liu, did you truly think she embezzled those 30,000 taels of the fallen soldiers' pension fund just to buy a few pieces of Suzhou embroidery or to eat bird's nest soup? That money was long ago converted into gold bars and smuggled across the border through secret channels, serving as military funds for the Northern D to recruit troops for their southern invasion. Furthermore, 3 months ago, when my father was ordered to investigate the Ministry of War's weaponry smuggling case and was on the verge of uncovering this secret network, it was Li Wan who stole your general's seal. She forged documents claiming my father was conspiring with the enemy, turning the tables and causing the entire Su family to be imprisoned. Every word was like a heavy hammer, slamming ruthlessly against the crown of Liu Zhang's head. The illustrious military achievements he took pride in, and the confidant he cherished as a treasure, turned out to be an enemy spy who had lurked by his side for years, feeding on the blood of Great Zhou's soldiers and framing the loyal and righteous. No, it's impossible. Liu Zhang's knees buckled, and he collapsed heavily to the ground. He turned his head and gripped Li Wan's withered neck in a deathly choke, his eyes bulging and bloodshot like a vengeful ghost. Speak! Tell me this isn't true. I gave you my heart and soul, and you turned out to be a Beatty spy? Li Wan's eyes rolled back as she was strangled. But suddenly, she let out a shrill, frenzied sneer that sounded like a broken bellows. Cough. Cough. Liu Xing, you fool. So what if you're the god of war of the Great Zhou? You were still played like a puppet in the palm of my hand. It's just a pity. That bitch Suyin has too much luck. If not for her, the Great Zhou Empire would have belonged to the Huyan clan sooner or later. You bitch. I'll kill you. Liu Zhang's eyes nearly split with rage. He unsheathed the sword at his waist and plunged it through Li Wan's chest in a single thrust. Blood sprayed out, splattering across Liu Zhang's face. Li Wan's eyes widened, her body convulsed twice, and she drew her final breath. Lord Gu, the minister of the Court of Judicial Review, stood up and coldly read the imperial decree. The emperor has long known of the irregularities within the general's estate and specifically ordered the eldest daughter of the Su family to enter the household for a secret investigation. Now that both witnesses and physical evidence are present, Lord Su's grievances have been redressed, and he is to be reinstated to his original post immediately. As for General Liu, for failing to manage his household and inviting a wolf into his home, nearly causing a national disaster, his title of Great General is stripped, his military power is revoked, and he is to reflect on his sins behind closed doors. A warrior who barely knew a few characters had lost everything, utterly defeated in the face of political intrigue. Liu Xing slumped, loosening his grip on the hilt as the blade hit the ground with a clang. Like a stray dog that had lost its spine, he crawled to my feet and looked up at me with a face covered in blood, his expression a mixture of intense regret and agony. Inner. He reached out with a trembling hand, trying to touch the hem of my skirt, tears rolling down along with the blood. I was blind. I deserved to die. I mistook a venomous snake for a treasure. Yet I wounded you until you were covered in scars. You can hit me, curse me, do anything, for the sake of the child. I beg you. Please give me a chance to make amends. He finally understood that the woman who had endured humiliation night after night was the true benefactor who had saved him and the entire general's mansion. I looked down at his groveling state from a height, my heart devoid of even a single ripple of emotion. I lightly brushed his hand away and drew a sheet of gold-flecked Shin paper stamped with the Su family's private seal from my sleeve, tossing it onto his face with a flick of my wrist as if granting alms. Atonement? You are not worthy. Liu Xing picked up the paper with trembling hands. Upon seeing the words written on it, he felt as if he had been struck by a bolt from the blue. A letter of divorce? The laws of the Great Zhou do not permit a woman to divorce her husband. but I have already requested uniquely to present this letter of legal separation for imperial inspection. The emperor has granted his approval. I turned around, pulling my fox fur cloak tighter around me, not sparing him even a single glance from the corner of my eye. Lu Xing, this child is the bargaining chip for my Su family's survival, not the fruit of any affection between us. From this day forward, you shall remain a trapped beast in your cage, and I shall return to the noble gates of the Su residence. Between you and me, we shall never meet again in life or death. The snow fell in heavy flakes. Stepping upon the pure white ground and supported by Chun Tao, I walked out of this general's manor that had imprisoned me for months, never once looking back. Behind him came Lu Zhang's desperate and shrill roar, which was gradually torn to pieces by the cold wind in the vast, empty snowfield. The heavy snow fluttered down like shredded cotton, shrouding the entire capital in a desolate and vast expanse of chilling air. I stepped through the thick snow, flanked by Chun Tao and several trusted guards, walking step by step toward the red sandalwood carriage parked outside the general's estate. Hanging from the carriage were no longer the lanterns symbolizing a wife of the Lu family, but rather the imperial bestowed red gold auspicious beast copper bells that represented the prestige of the Su family. Suyin, stop right there. Behind me, the heavy gates of the general's estate were flung open with a crash. Lu Xing hadn't even had time to throw on a cloak. He wore only his thin inner robes, stained with Li Wan's blood, as he rushed down the steps barefoot and stumbling. With a dull thud, the god of war, the once insufferable great general of the realm, fell to his knees without a shred of dignity, his weight crashing into the icy snow to block the path of my carriage. The cold wind howled, blowing his long hair into a disheveled mess. He lifted his head, his handsome face already smeared with a mixture of tears and blood, his eyes filled with agonizing remorse and supplication. "Ener, I beg you, please don't leave, all right?" Lu Xing reached out with trembling hands, trying to grasp the hem of my fox fur cloak, only to be coldly pushed away by the guard's scabbard. Ignoring the swelling on the back of his hand, he simply stared in despair at my lofty countenance, his voice as hoarse as a dying beast. "Everything is my fault. I was the one who was foolish beyond belief. I was the one blinded by greed, but you are carrying my flesh and blood in your womb. You cannot deprive me of my right to be a father like this. You cannot be so cruel." I came to a halt, looking down from my high vantage point at this man who was as lowly as mud in the snow. Once upon a time, on our wedding night, he had used the same cold and cruel posture to leave me alone in the empty bridal chamber, allowing all the servants in the manor to trample upon my dignity. It was also he who had used the most poisonous words to humiliate me, attempting to drive me to a dead end. Now the tables have turned, and it is truly gratifying. Cruel? I let out a soft laugh, but the mirth didn't reach my eyes. It was colder and more piercing than the drifting snow of midwinter. "Lu Xing, have you still not grasped the situation? From the moment you indulged Li Wan's attempt to humiliate me during the tea ceremony, from the moment you allowed her to withhold the main courtyard stipends, and even from the moment you held that treasonous spy in your arms as your white moonlight, from those moments on, there has been nothing between us but a life and death struggle of schemes. Not a shred of marital affection remains. No, that's not how it was. Those days we spent together, the way you felt about me." Lu Xing stammered, incoherently trying to grasp at a final straw of hope. "Those days were nothing more than a form of torture I endured to fulfill the emperor's decree and to save the entire Su family." I ruthlessly cut off his delusions, every word striking like a dagger to the heart. "Did you think I cared for your pathetic scrap of love? You were merely a tool I used to produce a bargaining chip. Now that the tool has served its purpose, it is only natural that it be discarded." Lu Xing stood frozen in the snow as if struck by lightning, his face ashen and his very breath seemingly at a standstill. As for this child, I placed a hand over my lower abdomen, my gaze disdainful as if looking at a mere insect. "His surname is Su. From the moment he is born, he will be the eldest grandson of the Su family. He will be showered with boundless love and inherit the Su family's generations of scholarly legacy. The only thing he will not have is a father like you, a man of ill repute who nearly brought ruin to the country and its people." Having said that, I didn't spare him another glance. I turned and, supported by Chun Tao, stepped onto the footstool and nimbly entered the carriage. Drive. The coachman raised his whip, the steed let out a long neigh, and the wheels rolled mercilessly over the thick snow, galloping toward the Sioux Manor. Through the slightly swaying carriage curtains, I saw Lu Jing collapse despairingly into the snow, his hands clawing desperately at the frozen ground as he let out wave after wave of shrill, agonizing wails. Like a stray dog that had lost everything, I lowered the curtain and slowly closed my eyes. The massive boulder that had weighed on my heart for months finally shattered completely. Half an hour later, the carriage came to a halt in front of the Sioux Manor on Chongning Street. The Sioux Manor, which had once been covered in official seals and deserted, was now completely transformed. The red lacquered gates stood wide open, and the gold-lettered plaque reading Sioux Manor above the lintel had been polished until it shone brilliantly. My father, Lord Sioux, the Minister of War, and my mother stood on the steps supporting each other, looking out with eager anticipation. Though they had grown much thinner, they appeared spirited, their eyes filled with the excitement and ecstasy of having survived a catastrophe. Father! Mother! I stepped quickly off the carriage, my eyes stinging with tears. My child! My mother rushed forward and held me in a tight embrace, her voice breaking with sobs. You have suffered so much, enduring such great grievances. If you hadn't put yourself at risk to set this plan in motion, our Sioux family would have long since. My father, his eyes red and his hands trembling, actually moved to give me a deep, formal bow. Ener, you are the hero of the Sioux family, and a hero of the Great Zhou. Father, you are overwhelming me. I hurriedly supported him, tears streaming down my face, but they were tears of joy. Our family has finally made it through. The next morning, the heavy snow had just cleared, and the sunlight scattered across the capital like crushed gold. Inside the main hall of the Sioux residence, incense smoke curled in the air. The chief eunuch of the imperial presence, Eunuch Li, entered the Sioux family gates leading a grand ceremonial procession and carrying a bright yellow imperial decree. By the grace of heaven, the emperor decrees, Su Yin, daughter of the Minister of War Su Jing, is of refined character and noble heart. In a time of great peril, she demonstrated supreme loyalty by venturing into the tiger's den to uncover ironclad evidence of the general of the state's treasonous correspondence with enemy nations, thereby safeguarding the great Zhou dynasty from the fires of war. Her merit shall endure for 1,000 years, and her virtue shines from the past into the present. Eunuch Li's sharp, high-pitched voice echoed through the main hall, every word representing the supreme imperial power and glory. Today, Su Yin is hereby conferred the title of first-rank Princess Zhaohua, granted a fief of 10,000 households, awarded 10,000 taels of gold, and bestowed with an imperial red gold iron certificate of immunity. The child in her womb shall be raised personally by Princess Zhaohua to carry on the Sioux family lineage, and no one shall interfere. By imperial decree, this humble subject, Su Yin, expresses her deepest gratitude to your majesty. I raised both hands high, steadily receiving that heavy imperial decree, and with it, the highest power a woman could ever attain in the great Zhou dynasty. The emperor played his hand brilliantly. Through me, he not only found a legitimate reason to strip Lu Jing of his military power and root out the northern spies, but he also gained a perfect trump card to balance the influence of the military generals. In exchange, he granted me supreme honor, wealth, and absolute freedom. In this game of power, the emperor secured the safety he desired, while I won back my life and the lives of my entire family. When news of the imperial title spread throughout the capital, Lu Jing, confined within the dilapidated general's estate, completely lost his mind. The title of general that he once took such pride in was gone. His command over 100,000 troops had been revoked and handed over to the emperor's confidants. Li Wan's corpse had been unceremoniously tossed into a mass grave. As for him, he could only face the ruins of Qingyin Pavilion and the cold canopy bed in the main courtyard every day, drinking himself into a skeletal stupor. Once, fueled by alcohol, he broke through the guards' blockade, desperate to catch a glimpse of me at the gates of the Sioux estate. But he couldn't even make it to the entrance of Chongning Street before my guards, now part of the officially sanctioned Imperial Guard, beat him with clubs like a common beggar, breaking his legs and dragging him back to that sunless cage like a dead dog. From that moment on, the capital no longer knew the god of war, Lu Xing. There was only a crippled man who had become the laughingstock of the world. Time flew by, and the seasons turned as spring gave way to autumn. In the early autumn of the following year, the osmanthus flowers in the back garden of the Su Manor were in full bloom, their fragrance drifting for miles. Amidst that rich fragrance, I successfully gave birth to a healthy and strong baby boy. The emperor was overjoyed and personally bestowed the name Su Qing, symbolizing the inheritance of the past and the ushering in of the future, with blessings that would flow long and deep. A steady stream of rewards was once again carried from the imperial palace into the Su Manor, and for a time, my prestige in the capital was unmatched. Princess, the young master looks just like you. With these features, he is bound to be a handsome top scholar in the future. Chun Tao walked to my side with a beaming smile, cradling the child wrapped in a bright red swaddle. Reclining on the brocade couch with a thin Suzhou embroidered blanket covering me, I lazily extended a finger to gently tease my son's rosy cheeks. The little fellow let out a giggle and grabbed my finger with surprising strength. It is well that he takes after me, I said with a faint smile. My eyes filled with the calm and composure of one who looks down upon the world. I thought back to a year ago, to the version of myself who hid a dagger in the bridal sedan, her heart filled with grim determination. To the version of myself who, on the canopy bed, endured humiliation and disgust while laying out a fatal trap step by step. It felt like a lifetime ago. In a woman's life, the most reliable thing is never a man's hollow sentiments, nor the schemes and deceptions used to vie for favor within the inner chambers. The most reliable things are the power held in one's own hands, the mountains of accumulated wealth, and the thunderous means to command the winds and clouds, to ruthlessly crush beneath one's feet those men who attempt to lord over you. Lu Xing intended to destroy me with cold violence, and Li Wan sought to kill me with poison, but they both forgot that I, Su Yin, have never been a delicate flower to be toyed with at will. I am a blade dipped in venom. I am a phoenix reborn from the ashes. Today, I hold immense power. My family flourishes, and my young children gather around my knees. The magnificent mountains and rivers of the Great Zhou, along with the bustling lights of the capital, have ultimately become the perfect backdrop for me, Su Yin. In this game, I have won cleanly and absolutely.